Well, it's 10:05. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It's day two of the summit. Yo, I am so excited. I'm over the top to this morning. And like I said, thank you for being here at the Speak Up Stand Up Summit. It means a lot to me and for our community. I'm so happy you all are here. Please know this is a safe, welcoming space where your voice matters. This is a space for learning, reflection, and growth. And before we get started, before we move forward, I want to thank our planning committee. Before we get started, I want to thank our planning committee, um, Landon, Jamie, Tiffany, Lillian, and a special shout out to Vivian and Paul. Also, I want to thank my colleague Jolie um, for assisting us with all of this. So we are very grateful. So before we get into moving forward, I'm going to pass it over to Jolie.
Hello, everybody. This is Jolie here, and thank you, Will, for sharing your screen with me. My name is Jolie. I am Will's colleague, right-hand man. I am whew, have an announcement to make. Sadly, our first keynote speaker, John Bell Edwards, cannot make it today due to a last-minute scheduling change. But no worries, our MC and advocate galore, will have his own special keynote and activity to replace John Bell Edwards' speech. So I also want to say thank you for your patience as we work out some early tech difficulties today. Let me go to the next slide. And I want to give a great big thank you to New Disabled South, who sponsored this summit, and therefore we were able to provide ASL interpreters. So thank you so much, New Disabled South, for making the summit and the world a more accessible place. So now I'm going to give it back to Will to take away the summit.
Hello. Thank you, Joe, so much for that. So about me, my name is Will Johnson. Like I said earlier, I work at the Human Development Center as the Public Information Officer. I am a self-advocate, and speaker. I believe in change, leadership, and movement. And this right here is a movement. So this is a 3-day summit. Um, on day one, we learned how to build community and look to the future. On day two, we learn from our past and how we can advocate for the future we want. And on day three, which is today, we will talk about how to make change by sharing our story. So get ready, get ready. So I want to do a quick recap of day one, where we had Dom Kelly. Dom showed us a map to problem solve. When problems feel really big, it's called spare of control. This tool is to remind us what control we want.
All right.
He also talked about Don reminded us that in order to change the world, we need to dream new possibilities, new possible. We need to dream of the world that we want in order to make it real. So on day two, we had Rebecca Coley. Rebecca reminded us that our movement were built by young people. You can be any age with whatever experience to be an advocate. Also, I love how she had the picture was our movement was built by young people. Also, she told us what is your cause to serve? Supporting programs like running for office, sharing information, newsletter, TikTok, etc. Personal development or growth. Now is the time to put your skills to work and help. There are many opportunities to engage. This is your community, your people, your movement in this space and time. So she also, I love this one. They wanted us to be thankful for crumbs. What does that mean? It's not being satisfied with what they're giving us. We must demand more because we deserve more. We have a right for more. Also, I loved how this quote was by Anna Presley. We are not fighting for strong. We are fighting for liberation. So I'm going to walk you through how to live it, shape it, and share it, turning my turning my experience into advocacy. So I want to ask you guys this and drop it in the chat. Please drop it in the chat. How are you feeling? How do we feel today? After the 2 days and today is the last day, how are you feeling today? Because the Big Beautiful Bill has affected our community in so many ways. Um, and I just want to know how you feeling today. And because of this summit, drop it in the chat. Because me, I'm feeling here, there, where, and alone there. But after this summit, I feel empowered. Like I know I can do something. So I want to remind you, you have the power. You can make change. We have a community. We are stronger when we stand together. So as Dom said at the summit day one, 17.7 million disabled people voted in 2020, 15.8 million voted in 2022. Let me tell you something, there is a power in these numbers. So I want to also remind you, your voice is also your power. Let's put the feelings into action. You are expert in your life. We must show policymakers how their policy affect our lives. Sharing your stories to be seen and heard. So I love this person in so many ways. She was an inspiration in so many ways. Alice One was a disability justice actor who passed in November of 2025. She pushed back against unfair ideas about disability by showing disabled people as real people with feelings, option, and creative and power, not as something to feel sorry for. She also she also uses storytelling as a way to make change, helping people understand disability better. So now I want you to meet Allie. I want you to meet Allison as we watch this video.
Disability is so much more than pain, trauma, and tragedy. There's creativity, adaptation, and talent that comes from living in a non-disabled world. I'm Alice Wong and I am a writer, editor, and disability justice activist. Disabled people hunger to see themselves accurately depicted, and I built my platform because there are so few spaces for us and by us. As a writer and editor, I address the lack of disabled voices in publishing, journalism, and popular culture, and illustrate the systemic ableism that renders disabled people as disposable burdens and objects of pity. Storytelling is a powerful form of resistance. It leaves evidence that we were here in a society that devalues, excludes, and eliminates us. Eugenics is not a thing of the past. Many people think having a disability like mine is a fate worse than death. The systemic ableism that I and millions of us face every day tells us that we don't matter, that our lives are too expensive and not worth saving. I want to change the way people think about disability from something one-dimensional and negative to something more complex and nuanced. There's such diversity, joy, and abundance in the lived disabled experience. We are multitudes. As a disabled person in a non-disabled world, I live in precarity like countless others. But I still have a voice. Everyone has a voice. Thinking of death and fragility often has truly instructed me on how I use my time, energy, and labor. I feel such urgency to make the most out of life and savor every single moment. By telling my story and amplifying the stories of others, cultural change can happen, and collectively we can build a world centered on justice, access, and care.
So now we will hear Allison share how center our lived experience as expertise.
This is a photo of me, a Chinese American baby, with a big tuft of black hair, laying on her stomach on top of a baby blanket, with a stuffed animal to the left. Does this baby look like an activist? Hells no! I'm sharing this photo to say that we all start from somewhere, and we all have the capacity to take action in a variety of ways. As a disabled baby born in a non-disabled world, I had to grow up fast and learn the ways of the dominant majority. I had to advocate for myself just to survive. And it wasn't until I was a young adult when I realized that systemic and cultural change is my ultimate goal. It's not just about getting my immediate needs met. It's for the other people around me and future generations. It took me a long time to identify as an activist because there are so many ableist BS ideas of what activism looks like. I learned how to be an activist through mentorship, collaboration, and experimentation. I became an activist by telling my story and centering my lived experience as expertise. So, why do we want to take action? For me, it's because I care deeply about a lot of things, and I want to create change. What do you care about? Maybe it's public transit, horrible sidewalks, climate change, or gentrification. Being curious and nerding out about something is the first step to civic participation. I believe civic participation is a key aspect of community living that doesn't get talked about enough. Community integration is so much more than going to work or school, to living outside of an institution, or making your own decisions. It's about taking an active role in the way society is governed by infusing your particular wisdom and perspective. It's about being seen and heard. And your view of the world is unique and valuable, no matter what others may say. While the disability community continues to face barriers and exclusion, our views are vital to create a more just and accessible world.
So elected officers, why should people share their stories? Elected officers make rules, laws, and policy every day that affect people. They need to hear real stories so they can connect to these policies with real people with faith and experience. So why do people with disabilities need to share our story? Why we need to share our story? Sometimes the government makes policy without talking to people with disabilities. Because of this, some of the policies that they don't get. Uh, make where's your story? Where's your story? Where does your story start? Um, so where does your story start? So let's look at problem solving map. Um, what's the issue that's bothering you today? For example, let's think about Medicaid, and that feels like a big issue, and I'm not sure where to start. How can you influence this issue? I can share my story to educate others, and also I can share others how I can show others who Medicaid makes my life better, and what would happen if it went away. What can I control about this issue? I can vote. I can write to my legislator, and I can create a speaker stand-up summit. So let's live it, shape it, and share it. Let's break down our lived experience. It went it so it's went so we can share it. What makes a good advocacy story? It stays focused on one clear action. It's short to the point. It connects with personal stories to action in a meaningful way. The action is easy to understand and easy to remember. Also, is invite people in. It feel encouraging and doubtable and not overwhelming or demanding. So Jolie created a worksheet brainstorms about our concerns. Our concerns connect to our experience and shape them into a script. She will share the link in the chat. So now we will break down each of these questions.
Hey everybody, Jolie here with Will's Screen. So, as Will said, we created a worksheet to help you think about your lived experience, brainstorm, and connect it to your concern or issue, and help you develop a script that you could share easily with people, whether that be your neighbor, online, or your legislator. So, I dropped the links in the chat. We have a Google Doc version that's a template. So, if you open it up, it opens as its own Google Doc. And then we also have a PDF version. So you are welcome to follow along as we go through it. Okay, everybody, so we're gonna try to do this together. So Will, can you also come into the screen? All right, so on the screen here, we're gonna break down the worksheet question by question on the white side or the left side. And then I'm gonna ask Will the questions and he's gonna give his ideas and we're gonna go through this worksheet together. So Will's example is gonna be on the right side or blue screen. So Will, when we think about Dom's sphere of control map and we think about a big concern or issue that we want to tackle together, what is a concern or action you want to take today?
Employment inclusive. Inclusive.
Inclusive employment?
Yeah.
Okay, great. But I also want to check, can everybody hear us okay? Can I get a thumbs up?
We can hear
okay.
you.
Thank you, Lily.
Perfect.
Okay, so right. So for this example, we're going to talk about inclusive employment. High five, we got this. Okay, so when you look at the worksheet, the next question is, we're going to start with the story. So, Will, like, how does this issue affect you, your family, and your community? And does this issue affect your health, work, or independence, or something else?
Well, um, having a job where you feel independent, you have a job, you can travel, I can travel. I have my own money.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more independent. I have benefits.
Yeah,
And I show up and be the best I can be every day. Like I feel I am me. And that's nothing. That's the word. I can show up and be me. And I don't have to rely on other people. I don't.
absolutely. You're a real inspiration for me, you know.
I appreciate that.
Okay, cool. So now we're going to tie it to the bigger issue. So, first thing, is there a policy, bill, or decision that connects the issue to your story? And or who has the power to impact this issue and who are you appealing to this action? So I think because we're trying to stay really general for this example, we're going to remove that policy or bill question. But Will, you could still answer who has the power to impact this issue around inclusive employment?
We do.
We do?
We do. And the people who are hired us,
Absolutely, employers.
I
And what do you want them to know?
hire us. Hire people with disability. Like that's what I want to know. Hire people with disability and we matter.
Absolutely. All right, so now in the worksheet, we are going to make it real. So, Will, what does this issue look like in real life?
Oh. So let's see. I have a job. I got promoted twice. I make more money. I travel. And on top of that, last year I was the staff award.
Yeah,
And put
Will
that
was
in,
actually awarded Staff Member of the Year last year for all of the School of Allied Health at LSU.
and I think the best thing is for me is I challenge myself every day. I try to become a better person, not only for me, but for my community.
And employment helps you with that?
No, it does. It steps me more out of my comfort zone. I wouldn't be the person that I am today. So I'm grateful. I am.
Excellent. Let's go. Okay, so let's name why else this matters. So why does this issue matter beyond just you?
So let me say this. Here, you need to hear us.
Mhm.
You never know what we can do for your company.
Mhm.
We can do a lot.
Mhm.
We could bring it to the table.
Mhm.
We can give you an idea that you never thought.
Like a speak up, stand up?
Hey, nobody never thought of this, but that would bring a light to it, and I'm grateful, like just doing that.
Absolutely. Okay, so now that we brainstormed your lived experience and tied it to the issue, let's shape it and build a script that we could really sell, okay?
Mhm.
So this goes into that next portion of the worksheet. And we're going to talk about a hook. So what is a hook? Hook is a way to introduce the message. It's a catchy way of grabbing the person's attention, okay? So you could create a hook by either thinking of a powerful fact about the issue that you want to share. Or if you don't have a fact, is there a powerful moment, experience, or story that would connect your issue with your family or other people, right? So, Will, what was the hook that you thought of?
Um, so adults with disabilities are mostly like twice live in poverty.
Mhm.
Um, and the only 34, there are only 34 and 8% of disabled people who are enough to work.
Mm-hmm.
And 74.4% of people without disability.
Right, that's a huge number. So only 34% of people with disabilities are in the workforce and are twice as likely to live in poverty compared to the almost 75% of people without disabilities in the workforce.
So
That's crazy.
definitely.
All right, so now we're going to develop a call to action. Okay, so what is a call to action? A call to action is a clear message that helps people, that tells people what you want them to do next. So we are going to write out exactly how you want them to take action on the issue. So Will, what was your call to action?
Calling employees to hire people with disability.
Yeah,
That's my call to action.
that's an easy one.
Uh,
Awesome. And then closing, what else do you want your audience to remember about this issue? And then what did you say?
by hiring people with disabilities, we help each other. We will have the life we will be more independent if you just hire us.
Absolutely. Okay, so at the end of the worksheet, there's a script, and it's kind of like Mad Libs if you played that game where you could just fill in the blanks. And we even have it paired with the letters that you answered in your worksheet. So like A fits with A. It's not a good example on this PowerPoint slide, but it makes sense in the worksheet. Okay, so we're gonna fill in the script. So first start with your hook, Will.
So did you know that adults with disability are likely to live in poverty compared to non-disabled people, and that only 34 of disabled people are in the workforce versus 74% of people without disability. My name is Will Johnson, and I have a disability. And because of inclusive workspaces,
I can.
I can live the life I want. I get paid. I have my community, and I don't have to rely on other people. And you know what? I was promoted twice last year and was given the 2025 Staff Award. Hiring people with disabilities is important because we bring unique skills, ideas, and knowledge to the workspace. That's why I'm asking employers to give us a chance to show you what people with disability can do. You can make your business a better place by hiring people with disability and paying us a competitive wages. Give us a chance and interview someone with a disability today.
Nice.
Not tomorrow, today.
Today. Cool. So, I know we're reading it line by line, so it's kind of clunky, but by the end of this, you give Will 5 minutes in his office and he'd make like a perfect TikTok with the script. So,
That's me.
that's like your elevator pitch. That's what you got. So you have that worksheet. Okay, so now that we shaped it, you want to share it. So like we said, you could put it on TikTok. You could, use that script for your legislators, tell your neighbors that. And what other ways can you share it?
So you can just share it by recording a video, making a podcast, posting it to social media, telling a friend, writing to your legislator, and more. So what are you advocating for? What lived experience do you have that makes you an expert?
Cool. So we hope that throughout today's summit day, you could think about things that we learned on day one, day two, other bigger issues happening in the world, and connect that to your lived experience and story. And then also, if you need some inspiration, we've invited LaCan back to talk about their 2026 advocacy agendas on things that they're educating the public about for to push through legislation. So we're going to have Christina come up and talk about these items. Sorry that the animation is so slow.
Good morning, everybody. Give me just 1 second. All right, can everybody see the fact sheet?
Yes.
Good.
See
Okay,
the fact sheet.
perfect. Okay, So these, if you were in our fact sheet breakout group last week, I am now excited to report back that we have this year's fact sheet, and I'll be sharing them with everyone today. And so as you see here, this is kind of, we have our new logo here. We've rebranded in the last year. And our first fact sheet is an emergency alert for people with disabilities. And so Louisiana does not have an alert for people with disabilities who go missing or may be in danger. Current alerts, such as Amber Alerts and Silver Alerts, only apply to children or older adults. And so they may also not share important information about a person's disability or support needs. And so a disability specific alert would help locate missing individuals more quickly, improve public awareness and response, and then give first responders the right information to act fast and swiftly and safely. And so, as we understand it, legislation is currently being filed to address this issue in the upcoming session by Senator McMath. And we're so excited to hopefully have this alert for our community after this upcoming legislative session. And so I'll stop sharing that. All right, so our next fact sheet here, we want to invest in Louisiana Rehabilitation Services, also known as LRS. And so Louisiana Rehabilitation Services helps people with disabilities prepare for and find jobs, as Will mentioned earlier. However, the program cannot use all of its available federal funding because the state does not provide enough matching funds. And so, over the past 5 years, Louisiana has missed out on about $155 million in state general funds. And that would allow the state to draw down all of the available federal funding, which is about $72 million. And that's a lot of money. And so, even with limited funding in 2025, LRS increased new service authorizations by 35%. They increased their applications by 22%. And this additional funding would allow the Louisiana Rehabilitation Services to serve more people with disabilities, improve those employment outcomes, and then support and stabilize the workforce. And so the council and LaCan will advocate for the $6.7 million needed to draw down that full federal match for LRS. We want to invest in people to increase waiver rates and direct support worker pay. And so home and community-based services and waivers help people with disabilities live at home in their communities instead of institutions. These services depend on direct support workers, also known as DSWs. They provide daily hands-on support to individuals with disabilities and their families. Current waiver rates do not reflect the true cost of care. And so as a result, providers struggle to hire and keep staff. Direct service workers earn very low wages, some of the lowest in the entire nation. And families are left to fill those gaps in care. And so in 2023, the council worked with provider agencies and advocated for the Louisiana Department of Health to conduct a waiver rate study. While the study has been completed, it has not been yet released to the public. And so the Louisiana Department of Health has shared unofficially that 5.36 million in state general funds is needed to implement those recommended changes. And so the council in LaCan will advocate for funding to increase those waiver rates and higher wages for direct support workers. And as always, if you'd like to know more about our advocacy agenda, please visit our website and I'll drop it in the chat. You can take it away, Wilbert. Thank you so much for having me.
So now we're going to have our next keynote speaker, which is a phenomenal person that I absolutely inspired by. Maria Town is the president and CEO of American Association of People with Disability. It was just called AAPD. Maria works to help people with disability to have more power in policy, jobs, and the economic. Maria is from Louisiana, and where her family still reside. Maria Town, the floor is yours.
Ask her to put her camera on so we can spotlight her.
If you could also put your camera on for me.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Will? I loved listening to your presentation.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We're excited to have you.
I'm excited to be here. I'm gonna share my screen. So, hello again, everyone. As Will said, my name is Maria Town, and the title of my presentation is Stand Up, Speak Out. I see a lot of familiar faces and names on this Zoom, and a lot of people that I have yet to meet. And I'm very excited to join you all this morning for this incredible summit. I want to thank Will and Jolie and Lillian and the whole team of people who have come together to organize this 3-day summit. I'm really honored to be here. Uh, this is the title slide of my presentation. There's an image of me at a rally to protect Medicaid. I'm standing on the National Mall at a podium, and I have a very intense look on my face. This was at a vigil that we held to protect Medicaid, where we were on the National Mall for 24 hours straight. And this was in advance of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passing. We were trying to prevent changes to Medicaid in that bill. And ultimately, the bill passed, and there's a lot of changes to Medicaid, which I'm going to talk about today. But we were able to prevent some of the most bad things from happening. So even if you don't always like win the way that you want, it's really important to stand up, speak out, and share your story. Because change, what is that? I'm going to quote Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., since we just honored Martin Luther King Jr. Day. The moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And to me, that's always a reminder that even in the day to day, if we don't if we aren't successful in our advocacy, it's important to keep it up over the long term. And that's how I view my presence here today from this moment on the National Mall. It's a part of our longer term goal to make sure that all people with disabilities can live the lives that they want and achieve our dreams. So let me see if I'm okay at advancing these slides. Oops, now I'm moving the screen. One moment. All right, so a little bit about me you've already heard, but again, my name is Maria Town. I am a cat mom. Does anybody have cats? I see Jolie has some cats. There are two of my cats on this screen, kind of giving each other a hug. I'm a disability advocate. I have cerebral palsy, so I've lived with a disability my whole life. And I'm originally from Baton Rouge and Hammond, Louisiana. Anybody here from Tangipahoa Parish? I'm seeing some love for Tangipahoa Parish. And I serve as the president and CEO of the American Association of People with Disabilities. We are a national civil rights organization that works to increase the political and economic power of disabled people. AAPD is what's known as a disability-led organization. So all of our staff are people with disabilities. Almost everyone on our board are people with disabilities. And we are also a cross disability organization. So we work on issues affecting people with developmental disabilities, people with mental health disabilities, blindness, chronic health conditions. And importantly for us, we know that not everyone who is disabled has a formal diagnosis. And it's still important that they're a part of our movement. We also know that excuse me, that disabilities change over time. So we work on issues facing kids with disabilities all the way to older adults with disabilities. And I do not know how to move these slides. There we go. So I thought I would start by telling you all my Medicaid story. On this slide is a picture of me at my kindergarten graduation. I'm using my walker and I have on a blue construction paper graduation cap. I received services through a Medicaid waiver program when I was a kid, and these services really helped me and my family. I had a direct support worker who came to my house and helped me kind of thrive in my community. My mom, who was a single mom and was going through nursing school at the time, she got respite services so that she could get a break that she needed in order to continue being healthy herself. And also, this waiver allowed me to get important services like physical therapy and occupational therapy at my home. So my mom wasn't responsible for driving me all the way across Baton Rouge to go to multiple appointments all the time. When I was about 11 years old, I went through what's called a redetermination, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. In that redetermination, I remember sitting in a room having to talk to a man that I'd never met before in my life. He had never treated me as a patient or been involved in my care, and I had to tell him about my disability. And ultimately, it was determined that I did not need these services anymore, and I lost them. So I lost my physical therapy, I lost my direct support worker, my mom lost her respite care. Um, and my family and I, we tried to fight this decision. I went to court, and I had to like get up and try to walk in front of a judge, which I really couldn't do. And we lost. And so why am I telling you this story? It's not a happy story. I'm telling you this story because there are changes coming to Medicaid that will make more people go through what I went through. And I don't want anyone to lose their services like I did. So, why am I telling you this? The One Big Beautiful Bill Act was passed in July of 2025. It makes many changes to Medicaid. One of those changes is that people getting Medicaid will have to go through a redetermination every 6 months. Another very big change is that some states will have to start having work requirements or community engagement requirements for some people who get Medicaid. So, what is a work requirement? A work or community engagement requirement is a rule that makes people work, go to school, volunteer, or do other community activities in order to keep their healthcare and in their services. Who will these work requirements affect? Work requirements will affect people who have Medicaid as a result of Medicaid expansion, and we're going to talk more about that in a little bit. So expansion can mean people who who have Medicaid through Medicaid expansion, but states like Louisiana also use 1115 waivers to expand coverage via Medicaid to all kinds of special populations, including people with disabilities. So it also affects people on 1115 waivers. And on this slide, oops, there were just images about work requirements. So what do these work requirements mean for Louisiana? Louisiana started Medicaid expansion in 2016, so 10 years ago. Today, close to 500,000 people, almost 500,000 people, have health coverage as a result of Medicaid expansion in Louisiana. Medicaid expansion also created almost 15,000 jobs. And who are those people working in those jobs? To Lacan's advocacy, a lot of people who have jobs as a result of Medicaid are direct support workers and direct support professionals, people who provide support to folks with disabilities. Louisiana has 7 different 1115 waivers that provide services, medical devices, personal attendant care, healthcare coverage, and respite services for adults and children with disabilities. And so on this slide, there's an image of Louisiana. It's very fun and watercolor, and it has different icons for different parts of the state. So there are a lot of people in Louisiana who will have to go through these redeterminations and have to manage these work requirements. Continuing, what does this mean for Louisiana? The state of Louisiana will have to check to see if people meet work requirements or exemptions when they apply for Medicaid or when they go through a redetermination. So what does that look like? If you are on Medicaid right now and you're going through a redetermination, the state will have to look backwards at a month of activity. If the state says, I'm sorry, there's a typo on this slide. If the state says that someone does not meet the work requirements, they have to tell you. They have to send you a letter, they have to call you, they have to email you. And people will have 30 days to then meet the work requirements. So if they tell you you're not in compliance with these work requirements, you have about a month to get in compliance. But what are some problems that might happen with that? Can anybody think of an issue that might happen? Oops.
Working in an uncomfortable position.
Yeah. And what if your mail gets delayed? What if there's a flood and you lose power for a couple days? That clock runs down. The other thing is that the state of Louisiana is going to have to put in a lot of resources to set up systems to do this with all these people. And those are resources that are going to get taken away from actually helping people get the services they need. And there are a variety of reasons that someone may not be able to meet a work requirement. Let's say you have a job. Will, can I use you as an example?
You can.
I can. Okay. So we all know that Will is a stellar employee. He told us his story. He's an amazing employee. But let's imagine Will gets sick. Okay? And he has to take a lot of time off work, and then he gets the letter from the state of Louisiana saying you're going through a Medicaid redetermination. And they look back at the past month, the month when he was sick, and see that he didn't work 80 hours. Will he lose his Medicaid? Jolie's nodding her head, yes. The answer is yes, right? If we're not careful, the answer is yes. And a whole lot of people, people who need Medicaid, people with disabilities, people who are working, will lose their health care. So what does this mean for all of you? People are going to lose healthcare and services. But we can work together to minimize, to reduce the number of people who lose their services, and hopefully we can make sure no one loses their services. How do we do that? Or what do we need to know? Sometimes you might hear people say that people with disabilities are exempt from these work requirements and from these redeterminations. Exempt means that they don't have to worry about it. And that is not exactly true. I'll tell you why. Um, it depends, right? So not all people with disabilities. So this slide has a lot of text. I'm going to talk you through it. So for work requirements, the work requirements require people to work 80 hours per month of work, community service, and or work program participation. Or you have to be enrolled in education at least half time. One of the questions that AAPD is asking to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is, do inclusive higher ed programs that may not provide degrees count as education? Because if they have a requirement that the program be degree seeking, that's going to leave a lot of people with disabilities out. So the work requirements will also allow you to combine education and work to meet the requirement. If you have an income that is higher than minimum wage, that helps you meet the work requirements. And then seasonal workers, so people who maybe work a lot during the holidays, or work at people who work at like pools, community pools during the summer. If they have an average monthly income over 6 months of the minimum wage multiplied by 80 hours, they meet the work requirements. The people who must be exempt from work requirements are parents, guardians, or caretakers of children under the age of 13 or people with disabilities, people who are pregnant or receiving postpartum coverage, foster youth or former foster youth under age 26, people who are medically frail, people who are participating in a substance use disorder program, people who already meet SNAP. SNAP is Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, or TANF, Temporary Assistance for Needy Families work requirements, American Indians and Native Alaskans, disabled veterans, incarcerated people or people released from incarceration within 90 days. So those are folks in jail or in prison or who have been released from jail or prison. People who are entitled to Medicare Part A or enrolled in Medicare Part B. A lot of those folks are going to be people who are over 65, but there are younger people who are duly eligible for Medicaid and Medicare. And then there are some optional exceptions. So states can choose to allow short-term exemptions for people who were in a hospital or a nursing facility or an inpatient care facility for a brief period of time. If you had to move counties or parishes for as a result of a federally declared disaster, if you are in a parish with a high unemployment rate, or if you had to travel outside of your community for an extended period of time to care for someone. So you had to leave your job in order to care for someone. Now, this seems like a lot of exemptions, but there are a couple of problems. Why can't I figure this out? So what does medically frail or medically fragile mean? There's not an existing legal or statutory definition for medically fragile. That sounds really complicated, but in law, if we look at the definition of disability within the Americans with Disabilities Act, there are words that specifically define what disability means. We do not have a law that defines what medically fragile means. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, did specify that medically fragile includes blind people, people with disabilities, people with serious or complex medical conditions, people with substance use disorders or disabling mental disorders, and people with physical, intellectual, or developmental disabilities that limit daily activities. So that seems like a lot of people are exempt, and that could be very good, but there will be people who get left out. Does anyone remember when COVID started and states had to distribute COVID vaccines? Do people remember that? Seeing some heads nod. Even though there was guidance from the Centers for Disease Control that articulated which groups were highest vulnerability to COVID, every state had different ideas about what that meant. And every state said, and I'll use cerebral palsy as an example, my disability. In some states, people with CP were able to get the vaccine first. In other states, people with CP were not able to get the vaccine at all because that state did not identify people with cerebral palsy as a vulnerable population. And that same thing has the risk of happening over and over and over again with how states figure out who is exempt from work requirements and redeterminations. So states are allowed what's called discretion. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act allows states to determine what they think medically fragile means, for example. Can I get a thumbs up if all of this is making sense? Okay. So when is all this going to happen? There's some key dates that people should be aware of. By June 1st of this year, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services is going to issue what's called an interim final rule that states will have to follow to implement the work requirements and redeterminations. Now I'm going to tell you something. This part makes me really mad. Usually, when the government is making big changes to the way that programs work, people have an opportunity to tell them what they think. Usually, there's something called a notice of proposed rulemaking, and there's a comment period where everybody from Christina or Will or Stuart can write in and tell the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services exactly how they think work requirements should operate. The government is not doing that this time. They are just going to create what they're calling this interim final rule, and states are going to have to start to follow it. They're not going to proactively engage people. They're not going to ask us, what do you think? As advocates, do we need to be asked, what do we think in order to share it? Do we need to be asked?
Of course we do.
No, we do not. We can tell people what we think at any time. Now, it's great. It's better when they ask. It's much better because they're more likely to listen then. But this time they're choosing not to ask people and not to listen to people. So by September 30th of this year, so about 3 months, Adrian asks, is that legal? The answer is yes, but it's not right, and not everything that is legal is right. So by September 30th, states are required to reach out to people on Medicaid to tell them what's going to be changing. So you should be paying attention to your mail, your email, your phones, expecting some kind of communication from the state Medicaid agency to tell you about work requirements or redeterminations by the end of September. And then by January 1st of next year, so almost a year from now, the work requirements are going to start. Now, I put another date on here, December 31st, 2028. If a state is experiencing issues implementing these work requirements, the Secretary of Health and Human Services can give them until this date to start implementing these new requirements. So when we get to January of next year, the state of Louisiana is going to have to tell the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, we're ready to go or we're not, right? They're going to have to say our computer systems can handle all this. We have enough staff to handle all this. And if they can't, they're going to have to ask for an extension. But the longest that extension can be until is December 31st, 2028. And I see an ask from Kay Petty to share the slides, and they will be shared. So what can you do? Get prepared. Make sure that you have your disability documentation ready. Gather the important documents that you have that provide information about the supports and services that you need. In states like Georgia, that have already implemented work requirements, a lot of people lost their health care not because they weren't working or they weren't exempt. They didn't have the paperwork to prove that they were meeting the requirements or exempt from the requirements. So get your paperwork ready regarding your disability documentation. And if you work, if you volunteer, if you go to school, make sure that this is documented as well. Put together your timesheets or your hours trackers if you're a volunteer. Make sure you have your schedule and your enrollment information from your school if you are in school. And on this slide, we have images of a doctor's forms and pay stubs and a calendar with a clock. Oops. What else can you do? Speak out. That's the whole point of today. So you can reach out to the Louisiana State Medicaid Director and their staff and tell them what you and your community need to make all of this communication and all of these processes more accessible and fair. This can include making sure that information is put into accessible formats like plain language, making sure that it's offered in Spanish, in Vietnamese, and in other languages for communities across the state. You can also say we need to make sure that the state is offering assistance for us to fill out all of these forms and more. You can also encourage the state Medicaid directors to make the exemptions as broad as possible. Again, remember I said that the states will have discretion to figure out how they want all of this to work. And you can say, it should work for us. It should work for me. Make the exemptions broad. And on this slide, there's a picture of a giant megaphone. What else can you do? We've talked about this a lot today in my presentation and in others, but you can tell your story and help other people tell theirs. If you rely on services and you need healthcare, tell your elected officials and policymakers how important these services are to you. If you lose your services or have lost your services in the past, tell people in power how that has impacted you and those you love. Telling your story can help give other people the courage to tell their story. And it's a lot easier to tell your story or for others to tell their story when they know they're not alone. On this slide, this is an image of another Medicaid vigil on the National Mall. Senator Bob Casey is standing there speaking in front of the Capitol, and behind him are a large group of disability advocates, and next to him are a pyramid of boxes. Inside of those boxes are thousands of stories from people with disabilities across the country telling Senator Casey and everyone else in Congress who is going to vote on Medicaid how important Medicaid is to them. What else can you do? You can vote and help other disabled people vote. Disabled people have a lot of power at the polls, and voting shapes the things we do in our everyday lives. So you can go talk to your elected officials and ask, what are your priorities for people with disabilities in Louisiana? Do you have plans to address the care crisis in our state? Do you plan to set up emergency alerts for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in a state where we have a lot of emergencies? AAPD has a voting initiative called Rev Up. Some of you have already been involved in Rev Up. Rev Up stands for Register, Educate, Vote, Use Your Power. And on this photo, on this slide, we have photos of different Rev Up coalitions. There's a group of disability advocates in New Jersey that make up Rev Up New Jersey. There's a young Black woman holding up a sign, and she's part of Rev Up Texas. And then we have one of our staff members, Alexia, helping to register voters in a group home in Ohio with Rev Up Ohio. So I think Rev Up Louisiana is kind of kicking off soon, and I hope you all can get engaged. You can host, we've talked about hosting your own Speak Up, Stand Up Summit, you could also host a candidate forum on disability issues for the state, for your parish, or for your city. And this is just a slide that this is an image that AAPD created for another event that we did, but it shows a lot of the different ways that disabled people have power and political power. We have political power through voting, through building power with other organizations. We can work to hold people accountable. Disabled people, we know what it means to adapt, and that makes us strong. We can help build commonalities across communities. And we have, powerful civil rights protections like Section 504 and the ADA that many people have fought for and that we have to fight to protect. So I really like this image and wanted to share it with all of you. As I close, I just wanted to share some things to remember. Your story, your time, and your energy are all really valuable tools. Everything can change, good and bad. Everything can change, but you can make change happen for the better by standing up and speaking out because you are powerful. People with disabilities are powerful, and you are an expert. So, with that, thank you for having me today, and I'm going to open it up for questions.
You can say something.
For real, thank you so much. I love your PowerPoint. As I was reviewing, I was like, oh yeah, she used the disability flag of the disability color. But I love it. You're an amazing person, so thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Maria. And we do have time for questions. So if anyone has a question, you can type it in the chat, or you could unmute yourself and ask Maria directly. We'll give you a couple minutes to ask those. And will also tell everyone while the questions are going on, I'm going to open up a poll so you can answer. That'll break us out into breakout groups, okay? But may the questions begin. Do you have a question for Maria?
So I have a question. You started your whole career, like everything that you're doing. What moved you, like the movement? What was
Um,
all of this?
so that's a great question. So I don't think I realized, let's see. I got to think about how I want to answer this. So I was born a little bit before when the ADA was passed. And the reason I mention that is because growing up, I was mainstreamed in school. So I, went to public school and was mainstreamed. And my mom went through Partners in Policymaking. I heard somebody mention Partners in Policymaking in the chat. My mom went through Partners in Policymaking in like 1989. And I, I think at that time, the kind of culture around disability was a little bit different than it was today. It was very much like your disability doesn't define you. You can kind of do anything. And so I didn't have a lot of access to disability community when I was growing up. I was really one of the only disabled kids in my classroom. And so I didn't realize that disability was a community or like an identity that somebody could be proud of. But when I was in high school, I was on the speech and debate team. Did anybody do speech and debate in high school or in college? No. I'm seeing one heart from Constance. So at the time, I never wanted to give a speech about disability because I was worried that people would think that was all I was about. And that was really a sign of my own internal ableism,
Okay.
right? That I had to really deal with. And but I was in Beta Club and I got invited to compete in the Beta Club speech and debate competition, and I wrote this speech about educational inequities in Louisiana, and it's honestly like a speech I could still give today. And my teachers said, Maria, this is a good speech, but we want you to talk about your disability because we know if you'll talk about your disability, you'll win. And I was really mad. I was really mad. And I felt really used. Okay. And I think for people who have been in this position before, you know what it feels like when people are making you into a token, when they're tokenizing you.
Right.
And that's what was happening. But I am also competitive and I wanted to compete. So I wrote this speech. It is not a speech I would give today. But they were right in that I won. And I won at regionals, and I won at the state, and I won at the national competition. But it was really at the state competition where my life kind of changed. So I was in the semifinal round. It was held in the old state capitol, and I was on stage there. And I give my speech, I get done, I get off the stage, and my speech was meant to move people. So there were people who were teary-eyed, but there was one woman who was bawling, and she was red in the face. She had snot coming out of her nose. And I went up to her and I said, "Ma'am, are you all right?" And she said, "My sister has cerebral palsy. She can't walk, she can't talk, but I know that she has something to contribute. And when I saw you on that stage, I knew that you were speaking for her." And that was the first time in my life that I realized two things. I realized then that my disability gave me a unique perspective on the world that needed to be shared. And I realized that I had a gift and a strength as a public speaker that needed to be used for the betterment of my community and for people that I cared about. And now that I've worked in disability for a really long time, my role is not to speak for people, it's to make sure that disabled people have opportunities to speak for themselves. But really, I wouldn't have even thought about having a role in disability advocacy if this stranger had not come up and said that to me, right? And I had no idea how to even have a career like this um, until I was well out of college. Um, but I think the big picture is that as I got more connected to disability community, I saw how incredibly powerful it is, both in terms of like how people understand themselves, the change we can make together. And I think for me, the thing that I want most of all is for all people with disabilities to have an opportunity for community. Because one of the ways that systems and people take away our power is by making us feel isolated and by making us think that we are alone. And so many people with disabilities, we get diagnosed, we have all these medical professionals who say, "Oh, your case is so unusual," or like it's really about what's happening in your body. Um, when disability is one of the like most natural things a person can experience. And so, I from high school, I kind of I really did. I made connections, I met people, I stayed in touch with folks, and went on to go work for the Department of Labor, where I focused on youth and disability and employment. And from there, I was recruited to work for President Obama in the White House and went on to lead the Houston Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. So I left DC and moved to Houston. And then I came back to DC to lead AAPD.
and I love it. Like
Thanks.
you're doing an amazing work. So continue doing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Robert.
Um, so we don't have any other questions in the chat. However, there were a couple of comments that I want to say. First up, Justina said she's trying to get more people involved to form Revved Up here in Louisiana. So please let her know if anyone's interested. Her contact and messages in the chat for people to respond to. And then Ashley said that she and Disability Rights Louisiana do candidate interviews that they post on YouTube before every major election. So thank you, Ashley and Disability Rights Louisiana. Awesome.
Yes. And I do want to add just a shout out to Justina. She has come, AAPD has brought her to DC to our advocacy day this past September. She was an incredible advocate, and I hope we can do more with all of you in the future. AAPD will be producing resources about the changes coming to Medicaid that I hope will be useful to all of you. If as you're doing your work in your own community outreach, if there are resources that you need, please let us know because we can help make them. So thank you all so much for your time today and for all the work you're doing.
Robert.
Thank you, Maria.
You.
Bye.
Now we're gonna have a conversation with personal advocacy and storyteller by Jerry Flores, and also Tim Vernea.
Viegas.
Viega.
Viegas.
I apologize. I was like, I think I'm saying his
It's
name.
all good. It's all good.
So yeah, Jerry is an advocate specialist, Strong Center for Development Disabilities, JD. Tim is the Director of Communications, the Maryland Candidate
Coalition.
Coalitions for Inclusion, Education, etc., MCIE, and host of the Think Inclusive podcast, which I think is awesome. The flow is yours.
Hey, JD.
Hey Tim, how are you?
I'm good. It's been a second.
Yes.
Yes, yes. I was just telling Jolie, thank you so much for putting all this together, and Will. Um, I've been feeling under the weather, so if you hear
Oh
me
no.
feel congested, sound congested, that's where. So I'm just glad that I'm feeling good enough to do this. JD, you are you're a storyteller. You tell amazing stories, but not just for entertainment, for advocacy. So let's start off with a question about, what life experiences have shaped who you are, and how have they pushed you to speak up or stand up for others?
Oh man, I think that that's a huge question. But I think that that is also like my biggest cheat code, right? Like, my job and listening to Maria earlier, like it really, like resonated with me because like all the pieces kind of came together for this to work, right? So I happen, to be someone who migrated from Puerto Rico to the States. So I'm not necessarily an immigrant, but we have an immigrant adjacent experience. So like that within itself is like kind of just feeding. And then I happen to be disabled, which again itself like lended, to creating different stories, different experiences to kind of share. My parents don't speak English, which also again gave me like a unique perspective to life. And so I would say that all of these big major pieces that are me kind of like motivated me to speak and say different things and kind of tell different stories and have those experiences to even talk about. And I think that also knowing two different languages also gave me the opportunity to understand how expressive I could be, right? Like, I would say that English is really metaphorical, right? But there are all these idioms in Spanish that, they don't translate well in English, but they're like standstill moments in my life, right? Like my grandma has an idiom for everything. So I can hear her already, like something happened and she has one little thing to say. And I'm like, that's a phrase that would fit right now perfectly, but I can't translate it in English. But there is an English version to it, and so like I'm I was able to also learn to use language in a way, because being bilingual, that I think made me more expressive. So it made those stories sound a little more passionate, if you will, um, and have a little more color to them than they would have. Not that people who only speak English can't tell those colorful stories. I just think that that is my niche because of my
Well, I
experience.
mean, yeah, and coming from a Latin background and culture, um, and hearing my aunts and my grandparents tell stories, it's just different. It's just different, I don't know how else to say it, but I'm wondering, for the people who are watching and listening, who maybe feel like they don't tell good stories, they don't know how to tell a story, especially as it relates to your experience in advocacy. Do you have any do you have any tips or maybe just a word of encouragement?
For sure. I mean, I think it's so funny. Like we all say piss on pity, right? Like we all don't want pity. We don't, we don't value pity, right? Because we are so much bigger than that. But I think sometimes you have to play up on those cultural norms. So you want to kind of tell the stories that hurt a little bit, right? Like they don't hurt you anymore because it's something that you've already been through and you've overcome and you've surpassed, but they hurt for other people to hear, right? And so I can give you the example. When I was a freshman in high school, I was transferred into a different high school. And I had to take this special elevator to the gym. And it required keys because it was a special elevator that wasn't open to the whole school. So I always had to like chase someone down to use their key to get on this elevator. And so within the first couple weeks of school, it was always kind of like a janitor who I chased down to get on there. And I think he's used to using this special elevator to go to a certain place in the school, which is the basement of the school. So when he put me on the elevator, he sent me to the basement of the school, which that's not where I needed to be, but I was trapped then because he just put me on the elevator, put his key in, turned the knob, sent me to the basement, and then I was trapped in the basement because you couldn't get back on the elevator without the key. And so for maybe 35, 40 minutes, I'm in the basement of the school, kind of trapped, can't do anything, can't go anywhere, and trying to like plan my survival. Like, how do I get out of here? Because I'm really scary, y'all. Like, I show up scared. You don't have to scare me. Like, I'm already a punk when I arrive. And so my biggest fear was like, oh my God, if I see a rat, I'm gonna die. Even though like it wouldn't have touched me, my feet don't even touch the ground because I'm in a wheelchair, my feet are on foot plates. And so when I go to talk to educators, I share this story with them, right? The idea that I was stuck in a basement and no one in the school knew where I was. And that, shout out to me being born during cell phone era that I could call my mom and tell her, "Hey, Ma, I'm in the basement. I need you to call the school so someone can rescue me." And then it hit me that she didn't speak English, but I called the school and said, "Hey, I'm in the basement." And they thought it was a joke. They thought it was a prank. And it's like, this isn't a prank. I'm really in the basement. Like, you should probably send someone up here because my next goal is to drag myself up the steps and fall in the middle of the hallway like Free Willy and just be dramatic, right? Like, that's what my plan was. So, I tell educators this story so that they can be conscious about the bodies that they're teaching, right? What does that look like? Because it makes everyone in the room uncomfortable. Because how could an educator not know where I was, right? How could they not know if I'm your student and I'm supposed to be in gym class and it's been 30 minutes since I was supposed to be there and you don't know where I'm at? What are we talking about? Are you really keeping me safe in this building? And should this special elevator really be the one that we're using? And so that's the story I tell. It's uncomfortable. It feels disgusting because it's like, dang, the girl was stuck in the elevator. The girl was stuck in the basement. How do we do this? And then even, right, the consequences were big. My mom took me out of school and I was out of school for 3 weeks and they threatened her with like CPS. And she's like, well, no, you can't keep her safe. How do I keep her? This is how I can keep her safe. So I think it's about saying those stories that hurt, but you just have to be sure where you are in your journey. Is it hurt you to tell that story again? See, to me, to tell you that I was stuck in the elevator, I graduated high school like almost 20 years ago. So now it's funny to me to think that I was afraid of rats, that I was thinking about throwing myself. I didn't even know how many steps I would have had to go up. Like, logically, it doesn't even make any sense in my adult brain, but that's kind of a story I tell. So you have to, I would say, you pick and choose those moments because they kind of resonate with people and they remember them later.
Uh, Great example of picking, like what you said, a story that hurts, that hurts. Maybe not, maybe you're 20 years removed from that hurt, but it's a story that everyone can learn from. How much time do we have? I just want to be make sure that we're good on with
You could
Q&A.
you could finish your questions and I'll have people type in questions in the chat and
Okay.
let you know how it goes.
All right. Well, so when you tell the story about being trapped in the basement, how do you help people move from going, "Oh, that sucks," to wanting to learn more or take action?
Because it's all about also then you follow up with questions like, what would you have done? Right?
Hmm.
Like you're in the basement, what would you have done? Like, what would have been your response? Like, you really talk, you want to meet people where they're at in this moment. So this made you feel like that. So how can we go forward? What would you have said to the administration? What would you have said to the secretary who thought I was joking when I called? Because she thought it was a joke. And then when I got flustered and really was like, no, I'm in the basement. Like, send someone to come rescue me. And then she's like, "Oh, well, baby, come get a hug." No, I don't want a hug from you, lady. I was almost eaten by the rats. Like, you know what I mean? And so there is, these things of you want to like a call to action. All right. So like, oh, the next step was talking to the principal of the school. The next step was then if the principal couldn't respond, well, let's push it to the superintendent, right? Like kind of thinking about all these different ways in which you can talk, but also how could you change your classroom behavior, right? Like what can be different in your classroom. And so I think it's really kind of cultivating those kind of conversations so that we can keep talking about how this was a big incident, how you as a teacher could have changed that.
Um, so you talked about telling the story to educators. Um, isn't this an example of a story that you could tell really anyone? Or yeah, are there different stories that you tell for different audiences?
Yes, there are different stories that I tell for different audiences because not every audience, like not that doesn't match every time, right? Like a legislator, for example, right? Like you only have a heartbeat with a legislator. Like you have a very small window of time. So if I'm talking to the legislator, I want to directly relate it to whatever, it is, whatever piece of legislation I want them to be educated on because I'm not a lobbyist, y'all. So I don't I don't lobby, but I want them to be educated on the fact that disabled people don't have access to dentists. So let me tell you this quick story
Hmm.
about how the dentist almost dropped me and like it was going to be
Wow.
complicated. But if I'm talking to like social workers, then, I want to talk about how the lack of access to care really, created all this baggage for me so that I have to like work myself up to kind of get to go to the doctors. If I'm talking to parents, I'm even more careful because sometimes parents can feel attacked, right? Because as an advocate, I can tell you that I feel like I'm the expert on me, and that if my life was a movie, I get the Oscar first, and then my mom can get the Oscar afterwards, like as a supporting actress. But I don't want to discredit my mom for anything that she's done, but at the same time, I don't want to be discredited. But so that's a fine line to walk. So when I talk to parents, it's like, all right, I share a story about when I was empowered by my mother or I empowered my mother in those same things, or to even look at things different, right? So there's some parents who have nonverbal children, right? But we know that nonverbal doesn't mean uncommunicative, right? Like we know that it doesn't mean that people can't communicate. So it's about how can we highlight that so that at the end of the day, my metaphor of the Oscar can be true in every house and in every story.
Has there anything, has it been hard at all about sharing your stories? And what helps you keep going even when it's uncomfortable or challenging?
I think it's hard because sometimes they're actively happening. So like I think that
Mm.
sometimes they're hard because you don't, it's hard to if it's happening to me in that moment, then it's just like it's all I talk about because it's what's on my brain. It's what I'm thinking about, even though I'm not necessarily ready. And so I can be a little abrasive and sometimes I can be a little more passionate, if you will. And so I can be a little bit less Like if emotionally I'm in a different place. I can give you an example, a quick one. I was on a panel once about sexual health, and the panel was stressing me out. Like as the other panelists, their responses was stressing me out. And I ended on the panel saying, well, all of us, we would do better if we all admitted that we were ableist because I was so upset at all the responses and things going back and forth. And that wasn't necessarily like the folks in the room weren't receptive to that, right? Like they weren't ready to hear something that abrasive, if you will. But I was taken to a different place on that panel, and emotionally I just wasn't in a place to be productive anymore. And maybe I shouldn't have responded, but that's just not my personality. Um, and so it was there that I was like, oh my God, like it's over. Like that was just really rough, and I'll never be invited back into this classroom. And that's just a risk I took and had to be cool. But for the most part, it's really about understanding that one conversation can change anything. And so you want to be able to do the most that you can with that one conversation, even if you're just dropping off like nuggets and bits and pieces. And you just have to trust that those bits and pieces that you chose were, of value. And really, you leave settled and they left settled. When I said that, no one left settled because no one is ready to admit that they're ableist. Like, so that was a big one.
Yeah, I can just think about how many times something someone has said, and maybe it's like years ago, maybe even 20 years ago, and you remember it for whatever reason, and I don't know why. But you could be that person, right? You could be that person that drops that nugget of knowledge, and then they're hearing JD's voice in their head, like y'all ableist.
Yeah, yeah, ableist. Like it could come back later. It just was in that moment, it was not it. And I was like, oh
Right.
man.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Are there any questions? I didn't see any, but doesn't mean people don't have them. If not, is
Seems like
there?
or
Go
seems
ahead.
like it was kind of discussing the disability issues, compounding with migration, and I appreciate your and you as the H word can both have interesting um, um, uh, takes on that.
Awesome. Thanks for the comment. All right. Anyone else?
I have a question. JD, so I love, you know how much I love you and I'm a big fan. And Tim, I have watched everything that you guys have. So the storytelling, I love how you guys do that storytelling. What made you guys start this process, like just doing this? I think it's very valuable and very important that everyone should do something like this.
I mean, for me, I think that that was so everyone has their own advocacy style. Some people write, some people, put together pictures or paint. Like, everyone has their medium of how, what advocacy kind of looks like for them. I was blessed with the gift of gab. And I'm pretty sure I got that from my daddy. Like, there's not a place that he goes that he doesn't know somebody or that he doesn't want to pause and say something to somebody. And so for me, the easiest way was through kind of talking and really connecting with people in that way. And then it just kind of grew from there, right? Like, all right, this is I can talk and I can talk a lot of junk. So like this really just kind of works for me. And it was more so formulating it. But I would say in terms of like when I started telling stories, it's because we're lucky as disabled people that there's just facts that our stories just support facts, right? So we can say like 1 in 4 Americans are disabled, right? And so then we can say, oh, look, not only am I one of the four, but I also know 4 other people that happen to be disabled, right? And so there's all these different facts. that are just put out there. So one of my things that I was talking about, that I have been talking about is womanhood, right? We know that access to gynecological care for women with disabilities is limited and hard to find. And so, me as a woman with a disability, I have a story to tell that's literally supports that fact. It took me until my 30s to find a gynecologist with experience working with disabled women, right? So, my story supports those facts that are put out there. And so, I think that's really where some of it also lies is finding the facts and kind of aligning the stories to the facts. And it just kind of gives it real life because sometimes people can't see it in real life in real time, right? They don't know it because they've never seen it. And so it's like, boom, here is like a show and tell kind of situation.
Mhm.
But again, like you pick and choose what you want to do. I also work in the space of advocacy. So I have the privilege of growing in this craft.
Yeah, and for me, um, I'm not a disabled individual, but the story that I tell is that comes from an educator who wanted more inclusion for my students and saw that the system was built um, against that. And so I started telling my story, as it relates to that, what I observed, what I was trying to do, and that was back in 2012, and I started writing, and writing has always been a strength of mine. So when people started paying attention to those stories, then I was like, well, I guess this is what I'm doing. I guess this is my advocacy. And same thing with the with the podcasting. I had previous knowledge of um, you know recording, audio recording, and editing and design, and so I just used the strengths that I already had to build that. So I feel very fortunate to be able to do what I do every day, and but I think as far as if you want to do this, if you want to you only you can do the advocacy that you can do, um, and with the strengths that you have. And once you find that sweet spot, you'll know it. You'll know it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have a follow-up question as well. Hey, it's Jolie here. So Tim, as someone, I also don't have a disability, and a lot of my job is supporting people with disabilities and helping amplify their stories. But so do you have advice for people who are non-disabled and how we could share amplify voices and JDU as well, like what our advice you could give to the allies of the world?
Uh, I would say I probably learned too late to really listen and amplify disabled people's voices. It's just like you could never do that too soon. And when I first became a teacher, all of the experts that I was reading and learning about were non-disabled perspectives. And it wasn't until I'm like, oh, there's another perspective about how a person should live or how a person should, make choices, how a person should have any sort of self-determination about their life. So it wasn't until I really started to listen and know people who were different than me then and so once that happened, you can't look away after that. You can't have another perspective. So that's what I would say. But the very fact that you were here listening to and hearing these stories means that you're in the right place. So
I think that it's all about sharing your platform, right? It's about, Tim has a podcast. I met Tim randomly one day in Atlanta, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to be on my podcast?" You know what I mean? Like, and so it's really about sharing your platform. It's about really using your network to highlight and hold up those that are doing the work, if you will. I hate when people say this phrase because the work feels fake because it's like, what do you mean doing the work? Give me something more concrete. But, really it's about using and kind of your network to kind of thrust those folks that, I'm not necessarily the voice that you hear all the time, right? I'm not the necessarily the person that's picked all the time, but there's lots of folks in your local community that are pretty much doing the work, that are working within advocacy, that don't necessarily have the big reach or the big platform. So it's about kind of highlighting them and saying, okay, well, there's this opportunity that maybe it could work in this way. Because that's how I was able to kind of grow as an advocate here in my local area, right? There was a nonprofit that was like, oh, like this is what you do. I think you're kind of good at it. How can we get you in different spaces? So, they had me facilitate some workshops. I was writing for their newsletter. They every time there kind of was an opportunity that kind of fit the work that I do, they were like, hey, do you want this opportunity? Do you want to try it? So I think it's really about kind of pushing and thrusting those folks into the spotlight if if you have it from your platform. Even Will, I met Will at AUCD at a conference, right? And it's just the idea like, oh, she's kind of good at this. How can we get her, to come present and come talk? And so those are the kind of things that like I think make folks ally, but also understanding when it's not your space, like when it's not your turn. You know what I mean? Like I can't speak to everything because I'm physically disabled. So those folks with indivisible disabilities, I can't speak to that experience. I don't have that experience, right? Those folks who might have multiple, identities, who might be part of the LGBTQ, excuse me, I'm trying to say that too fast. Some those folks in the alphabet mafia who also happen to be physically disabled. That's not my experience. So like that's not my space. So it's a no, let me tell you about this other person who does the work who might be better suited, right? Like to kind of speak and tell that story. Because again though, it's really about creating that network and putting those people in those places. And also being not afraid to step back, when it just doesn't fit.
I love that.
All right. Any other questions before again, not exactly sure when we're done here, but happy to keep talking.
No, we could call it.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you so much. That was great. I love everything about this. So now,
So now we're gonna take it back.
Thanks for
So
having us.
Yeah,
yes,
thank you.
thank you.
JD. Hi everyone, Jolie here. I know it's about 12:12 and on the agenda we had a second breakout group on there, but it's been a long 3 days
Yes.
and we had a lot of activity today. And so I think we should continue this conversation after the summit.
Yeah.
And we have ideas on that. But before we get into that, I'm gonna let Will close it out.
So, jeez, she won't let me close it out, and I'm about to get emotional already.
Get it?
So just creating this, I'm excited. So this has been a dream come true. I thank you all so much for just showing up. Thank you to the speakers, the just everyone. Like, I don't know, the interpreters. Joe, thank you so much. The planning committee. And I'm grateful. I am. I'm grateful that I created this. This is not it. I'm just letting y'all know now. This is not it.